In the meantime, the Supreme Court may have given Nigerians some respite after its judgment on the Naira. The country is arguably facing its worst currency scarcity in history, leading to chaos in different parts of the country. Will the Central Bank of Nigeria, known to snub rulings in the past, concede to the judiciary? We'll wait and see. Samson Osagie, a legal practitioner and chairman, African Bar Association Nigerian Forum, is my guest now. Before we delve in deep, I'm so excited that you're my guest today because you were in Nigeria's National Assembly. Take us through some of the drama we just witnessed in South Africa. The president is meant to address, he's right now addressing the parliament in South Africa. There was chaos, commotion, and back and forth, but the speaker was able to manage the House. Now the president is right now speaking to the nation on the joint session as we speak. Samson Osagie, representative democracy, familiar terrain for you. What kind of democracy is Africa forging or gifting the world?
Well, thank you, Sulaiman. It's nice to be with you again on this program. It is true that Africa continent pretends to practice democracy, but by and large, a number of African countries, Nigeria in particular, and a few other countries, are only pretending to be in democratic governance. We're just managing to have what we can call civilian rule, because we have been unable to imbibe democratic ethos, democratic tenets, obedience to the rule of law, and guaranteeing justice, freedom for the ordinary citizen. Because the government, the main thrust of a democratic regime is that ability to abide by the rule of law, obeying court decisions, and then getting the people to have the requisite freedom that they have in their constitution. To a large extent, South Africa is doing better in terms of democratic tenets and democratic culture. As you can see, the president is addressing a joint section of both National Assembly. We are not going to find that in Nigeria except during budget presentation. All efforts to get the constitution amended, to require the president to address joint section of the National Assembly during critical moments have not yielded any result by way of constitutional amendment. So by and large, we are yet to fully imbibe the culture of democracy. We only just pretend to practice it. We are not willing, and we are not practicing what democracy ought to be for the people. We just in a civilian rule, that's all.
You know, it's always a delight to come back to you talking about legal matters and also, of course, representative democracy. Now, you said something about critical times, and for instance, Nigeria is going through critical times. Now, let's take this South African example, for instance. One of the key issues that the president is addressing on that joint session is the issue of power, electricity. And that's an amazing one for a country that feels so hard done by electricity supply in South Africa. Now, for our issue today, we're talking about the scarcity of two commodities for the people, if we want to call the Naira as a commodity. The Naira is scarce and petrol is scarce. So ideally, shouldn't we also be having such a joint session in Nigeria to address this? Samson Osagie, it looks like I lost you for a bit. If you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now. I can hear you now. I heard exactly what your question is.
Okay.
Shouldn't we be having a joint section of the National Assembly where the president is speaking to Nigerians? But you know that that is not in our culture, for the president to respond swiftly, to issues of grave national concern. And you said there are two commodities that are scarce in Nigeria: petrol and what is it?
And the Naira,
and of course currency. The truth of the matter is that a lot of things are scarce in Nigeria. The problem has now been aggravated with these twin issues of petrol and of course scarcity, coming at a time when the nation is undergoing critical transition, democratic transition, where people are expecting to go to the polls in the next few days to elect their new set of leaders, both at the legislative and executive levels. This is just an example of what you find in a democratic setting that does not take into reckoning, the feelings of the people, the welfare of the people, and the kind of way that people relate to governance. It is not as if this issue, particularly of currency monitoring policy, it is responsibility of the central bank by virtue of the Central Bank Act, Section 15 of the Central Bank Act, up to Section 1821, to carry out monetary policies by way of issuing notes with the approval of the president. It's a policy, but the truth of the matter is that the utility of any policy is not in its content and implementation alone. It is also in its timing and the prevailing circumstances under which such policies are being implemented. The challenge we are having at the moment with the currency swap issue is that the timing is very wrong. It's wrong because the nation is under pressure, undergoing democratic transition, essential commodities are scarce, energy is not available. I don't know how many hours we get electricity. There is so much pressure on the Nigerian populace. And these issues they ought to have come way before now or sometimes in the future. They are good policies aimed at checking, the habitual nature of certain persons who have decided, to be holding the national currency in their bedrooms, in their offices, in their various individual vaults. So much so that the banking system do not even have as much money as we have in the hands of individuals. It's good policy to that extent, but the timing and the pressure that is already under that the population is already going through is quite a traumatic experience for the Nigerian people. And I believe that what the Supreme Court has just done is to put some seal on the issue for a while in order to ensure that these processes do not immediately choke the citizens and allow some time for the policies to flow. And of course, the various stakeholders are meant to address the issues much more critically within the courtroom and within the purview of the law, and that is why it has adjourned to 15th of February for the matter to be fully heard. So it's a challenging situation for us, and it is most inappropriate at the time that this policy is being brought. And it exemplifies, the character of our governance structure that does not take into account the well-being of the people when you are churning out and implementing policies.
And this is where I come in now that we're looking at the Supreme Court. And the question on the lip of many is it legally allowed for the Supreme Court, while it is yet to make a pronouncement on the matter, to request parties to hold fire till 15th of February? Well, Dr. Osagie, I think...
yes, I can hear you. I don't know whether you were asking the question about the letter position of the Supreme Court on the matter. Absolutely. No, the parties before the Supreme Court. Hello? The parties before the Supreme Court. Are you hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
The parties before the Supreme Court are tiers of government. 3 states of the Federation have joined to have the Supreme Court to invoke the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, to look at the issue. And the Supreme Court have said, okay, in view of the urgency of the matter involved, it is putting an interim injunction, pending when all the parties involved will come forward to address the issue legally. The Supreme Court is the final court in the land, and if its original jurisdiction is invoked, it behoves on the other party, to challenge that, and his lordships will rule one way or the other as to the legality of the invocation of their original jurisdiction. So I cannot sit on appeal on what the Supreme Court is already adjudicating upon. But I believe that the court will not deny any person who comes before it. But at the appropriate time, the court will make it clear whether it has jurisdiction on the matter or not. But in the interim, the court has powers to invoke its jurisdiction and its judicial powers, to temporarily halt a situation that can lead into catastrophe. And I think that is what the Supreme Court has done. It has not taken final decision on the merits of the case before it or not. It is like, let us allow things to remain in their status quo ante bellum before the matter comes before it. And then on the 15th, all parties will address the court.
And I think, well, there seemed to be a freeze on the connection to Dr. Osagie, but once you're back, we can get back to this conversation. If you just joined us.
Yes.
Okay, I see you're back. I'm trying for us to look at, okay, the status quo that we've been asked to revert to. At the moment, what's happening in Nigeria is that the CBN is yet to speak on it, and the government is yet to speak further on that, and the people are having a hell of a moment going about spending the old Naira notes. So the Supreme Court ruling asking everyone to suspend that for the now is still not yielding the results as everyone had expected.
Yes, the Supreme Court ruling is the ultimate position to which all persons and authorities must obey. Neither the government nor the Central Bank of Nigeria or any other person or persons or authority have any other step to take until the Supreme Court comes with his final verdict when it has heard all sides in the matter. So its ruling must be obeyed by all parties, and that is what is meant by rule of law. If government or individuals or groups are not going to obey the Supreme Court, then we are in an anarchical situation. And I think that shouldn't be. And I know that in spite of our reckless non-adherence to the rule of law, this is not one decision under the current circumstances that we find ourselves, where Nigerians are having hell, assessing their funds and having to be able to earn a living, that the Supreme Court pronouncement has come to, give a succor that the authorities will not adhere to. Of course, we are aware that the president has called a Council of State meetings, and I expect that they will abide by the decision of the Supreme Court to suspend further action on delegitimizing the old Naira notes by 10th of February, which is tomorrow. So I'm very hopeful that even government will have to, and a lot of people have spoken in this regard, that government has no choice, the CBN has no choice but to obey the decision, and of course the interim order that has been given by the Supreme Court. It is the ultimate court in the land, and having intervened by whatever means, I think the Supreme Court decision must be obeyed at this point in time.
Well, talking about comments, varied comments, let's take this coming from your colleague, Liboros Oshoma. He's been asking questions, and some of the questions he posed there, they sound rhetorical, being a lawyer, but again, I think I should bring this right before you. And he says, since the fact that the issuance of currency is on the exclusive list, can it supersede the first schedule of the Constitution, which is that the government's responsibility is the welfare and security of the people?
He made a comment, it's not a question. The exercise of the powers of the central bank as contained in the CBN Act, and of course, currency is on the exclusive legislative list. It cannot supersede the welfare of the people. But if the policy is intended to drive a regime that will eventually and ultimately in the long run help in promoting the welfare of the people, it's something we should give a trial. But my challenge is that the timing of a policy and its implementation is as important as the content of the policy itself. And that is my position on this matter. I believe that every government action must ultimately be geared towards promoting the welfare and security of the people. Any action of government that does not do that, it means it's detracting from that constitutional provision. And government has a responsibility to abide by whatever intervention, as in this case, we have found the intervention of the Supreme Court in order to ameliorate the situation and then find a way, to get around it in order to ameliorate the sufferings of the people.
What would you have suggested if you were given the opportunity to give solutions to what Nigerians are going through? Would you have wanted a situation whereby both the old and the new would go, on at the same time till such a time when the CBN can say, well, we've been able to mop up the old notes?
Absolutely. I mean, other countries in the world carry out currency swap. I mean, the UK is currently carrying out its currency swap. It will take a number of months and sometimes running into years. It's always seamless. You cannot even have any hula baloo about it. You know, it is the constriction of the time frame within which Nigerians should submit their old notes and then get their new notes. That is the cause of the problem. And as a matter of fact, having submitted their old notes, they are unable to access the new notes. And that is where the sabotage is coming in. So if the central bank was not prepared, you know, to make sure that the people have access to the new notes, why are you taking their money from them when they will no longer have access? Look at the case of that man who got himself stripped naked because he needed money to feed his family, and the bank was holding on to his money. So this type of policy for an environment where a lot of people are not IT savvy, a number of people are still not used to electronic transfer. In our rural areas, a number of people do not have access to networks. It's a policy that ought to have been implemented in phases, gradually, seamlessly, over a long period of time, that the people will not have to suffer any untold hardship, you know, in the course of implementing it. So for me, I have no problem with the policy and the intent behind it and the content, but I have a problem with the timing and the strategy of implementation because it has endured hardship to the people. It ought to have been a matter that ought to have started in the last 6 months or even 1 year, so that by now the whole tension would have eased off and the citizens will not have to be going through a grueling situation, you know, having to earn a living after submitting their little money to financial institutions.
So now, because you're also a grassroots person, you know, speak to us what the people, those people around your constituency, what they're going through at the moment, because we have 2 queues that Nigerians are going through at the moment. You have the queue to get money, you have the queue to get petrol, and perhaps, did I say 2? 3, and you also have to queue to get your voter card until just recently. So when you gauge, you know, the information, the comments from these people, how would the country have handled these? Because we already spoke about the currency swap, but for the petrol and the voter card, these are some issues that, again, if you put it on the table, it needs a political intervention as well.
The situation with the people at the grassroots is a very pitiable one. Some people have commented in the past, and I have seen it happen, that people have practically in the rural areas resorted to trade by barter, you know, where they sell yam for the plantain they want to have, and accessing little currency notes have become a matter for which you have to pay huge sums of money for. And how much are these people actually having access to under normal circumstances? It's a grueling experience, and it ought not to be. And the coincidence with fuel scarcity and the time for voters' card collection is even much more striking and has accentuated the suffering that the people are going through. And I think that what government needs to do is to further liberalize the process of this currency swap in such a way that the people are not put under pressure to go and be queuing and fighting at point of sales or ATM machines. And the situation is not even helped, you know, by the conduct of some bank officials who even hold these currencies and eventually sell it, you know, to the public, you know, at great cost. So we talk of exchange of naira to naira now at huge exchange rates, sometimes 30%, 40%. So at the grassroots level, it's a whole lot of suffering that they are going through, and they are not smiling at all. And government ought to do something at this stage to liberalize the process. This election will come and go, because the way it is looking as if everything is done to target the election. No, this election will come and go. The memories of the grueling experience of the citizens will not fade away easily, because whether you like it or not, the political class or the elites have a way of getting around some of these issues. But the suffering masses, they do not have much opportunities. They do not have much alternatives. So I believe that this process should be further liberalized. It should be seamless, and the people should not be put under pressure so that they can access their fund easily and then be able to earn a living and go about their daily businesses. Banks that have stocked a lot of money and they are not releasing it to members of the public. I think we need to see stiff disciplinary measures against one of these banks, because the slap on the wrist that we are seeing, arresting some officials and releasing them at the end of the day, is not enough. The Nigerian citizens at this point in time, they are suffering, and it ought not to be. And that is where the Supreme Court ruling is of immense help, even to government and the central bank itself.
Let's close on this quickly before you leave. What's your assessment of campaigns so far by every political party and player leading up to this election on February 25?
Well, for me, there is a huge gap in terms of difference in campaign contents and approach with this election and previous election we have had. Both the political gladiators themselves and their supporters appear to have actually moved away significantly from issue-based campaign to personality attacks, and I think that is not good enough. I think that at this point in time, there are issues we shouldn't be campaigning with, and issues of personal health, issues of personal state of origin or ethnicity, and a number of personal issues. The campaigns have virtually been personalized to the extent that some have been made to be villains, while others are portrayed as angels. Indeed, there are no villains, there are no angels. We just have a set of persons who have crossed the hurdle of accessing their party's primaries and becoming the candidates. There is no angel among them, and we just have to make do with whoever we find at the end of the day. We should reduce these personality attacks on one another. It does not augur well, because eventually one of them is going to be our president. And I believe that at the end of the day, we must have to live with it. So that is the difference I find, and I hope and I pray. I have thought that we have a much more robust election, devoid of personality attack and much more based on issues. This time around, I haven't embarked on a transition from a democratic government to another democratic government for about the sixth time since this Fourth Republic began in 1999.
Dr. Samson Osagie, legal practitioner and former lawmaker, many thanks for speaking with us.
Thank you, Sulaiman.